Hey y'all, Juice here, and the recent livestream was fire. We finally got Jail in Genshin. We finally got Neuvillette and Jotaro's kits. So today, I want to discuss with you all who you should consider pulling for based on account value and what their kits do, and how they might synergize with units already available on your accounts. My name is Juice, and that was the Fresh Squeeze. Let's get into it. Feel free to use the timestamps below if you're only interested in one certain topic. Neuvillette is a Hydro Catalyst user whose kit appears to be about dealing continuous AoE damage with his special charged attacks. These charged attacks by themselves take a long time to recharge, so he utilizes source water droplets summoned by his skill and burst to shorten down the time. Wriothesley is going to be an on-field cryo DPS who operates by enhancing his normals and firing off up-close cryo normal attacks. He also uses his charged a tiny amount and has a solid nuke burst. Like most cryo units, Wriothesley will scale off attack, and Neuvillette scales off HP as supported by his A4. Wriothesley as a cryo unit will arguably have two main roles, Melt and Freeze. We can presume he'll play well with Bennett and Xiangling, with some sort of cryo flex in the back, potentially Shenhe being the best final slot for him to amp up his cryo damage massively. You can also go the route of Kazuha if you need some grouping, but we'll have to wait until he releases to see if his ICD is strong enough to keep up with that much pyro application. He can also play in freeze teams as a main DPS. While I personally believe he's more suited to Melt, and other units such as Ayaka and Ganyu are more viable for freeze, he is playable here alongside units such as Kokomi, Shenhe, and Kazuha. You could even consider replacing Kokomi for units who are typically awkward in freeze comps such as Xingqiu or Yelan, since he'll be doing normals on the field. Neuvillette, on the other hand, has a very handsome hypercarry team. This assumingly consists of him, Kazuha, Fischl, and Zhongli. We can assume from looking at that giant hydro pump that Neuvillette does that he'd appreciate a proper shield as to not get interrupted. Taser in general is a decent Neuvillette team too. You can also viably slot him into Hyper Bloom or Bloom teams as the on-field Hydro options, with any effective Dendro, Electro, or Flex units you have available. And yes, you can try to play the Bennett Xiangling core with him too, but you'll be more likely to pick Zhongli over an Animal Flex for interruption reasons, and depending on Neuvillette's Hydro ICD, we don't actually know who would get the Vaporize in this team. I'm guessing it would be roughly 50-50. But regardless, this team still does solid DPS, but not his best choice, and I don't think it will beat the legendary King Child, ironically. So, based on roles, first, do you need a DPS? Yes. Alright, cool. Now, do you have care for any of the particular teams listed? Yes? Okay. Now, who do you already have built in those teams? And how much more investment would you have to pour in to bring them up to snuff? Do you have no other replacements for them in these teams? Use these questions as a reference point to decide whether you really need either or for your comps. Fun fact before we keep going. Wriothesley's Japanese voice is Daisuke Ono, the Jotaro dude. Do with that information what you will. Based on their kits, I believe that Neuvillette has more of an AoE focus, but Wriothesley seems to struggle in AoE, but does just have the slightest amount of it. Both of them can use Kazuha in their comps or employ some form of AoE in their teams. Units who are competent in AoE are generally more valuable since we already have access to so many good single target options nowadays. I think that Wriothesley is more likely to be powerful in boss-oriented content in general, but I feel that both units are capable of clearing both kinds of content. They aren't as black and white as Hu Tao and Nilou Bloom teams. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, why not consider liking and subscribing? Maybe even leaving a cool comment down below. If you don't, you're going to jail, getting sentenced by Neuvillette and put into Wriothesley's prison. Don't say I didn't warn you. Moving on. I believe that Wriothesley will get better when more melt-oriented supports come along, and will most likely synergize with any future weapon or artifact set which is a primary focus on normal attacks. I can't see his team archetype options expanding much beyond Melt and Freeze, or his Freeze prospects getting much better than they already are, unless the Hydro Archon is able to turn that around for him. Neuvillette is already quite flexible by nature as a Hydro unit, but he has the opportunity to improve massively as no HP based buffer has been added into the game yet. We'll have to wait and see what the Hydro Archon actually does, but I have a feeling he'll certainly have superb synergy with her due to their close relations in the story. Other than that, he'll appreciate future weapons and sets which are based on charged attacks. A good metric to go by is whether the units open up more teams for you, or if you already have the kind of team they offer. For example, with Wriothesley, if you're already running a team in Abyss with Bennett and Xiangling, or have already built a reverse melt team in the past, then you can't really make the most of his kit. Or if you already have an Ayaka, and him being able to play in freeze would just be weaker than what you already have. Or for Neuvillette, if you're already using Kazuha in a team, you're a bit screwed since Kazuha is his best damage amping support, and your only other animal option is Best Girl Venti, since he's able to provide him with good grouping in his team. As for all other animal supports, no. It's also worth stating before you pull for either of these guys that there's a big investment commitment to be made. They're DPS units, so they're gonna need proper care and attention when it comes to their artifacts and talents, which costs a lot of time. They're also both DPSs, which means by nature you'll be building teams for them, not just building them to slot into teams. That's a pretty obvious statement, but I thought it was worth reminding you to check over your resources to make sure you don't pull day 1 unprepared with like -2 Mora. Plus, they both seem to play as hypercarries, which doesn't make their case any better. Hypercarries tend to demand some serious long-term investment into good weapons and good teammates too, if you hope to reach their top potential. Granted, you're rewarded massively for such investment, but trying to go cheap on a hypercarry with 888 talents and mid artifacts almost never goes well. We also don't even have an HP buffer yet, so that's something else to look out for with Neuvillette, and Shenhe exists for Wriothesley, who's already pretty niche. Excellent in said niche, however. Mentally prepare yourself to spend the next 2 to 3 months of your Genshining life caring for them if you hope for them to perform. For those of you who should pull based on coolness points. Obviously Wriothesley. Was that even a competition? Wriothesley and Neuvillette are both promising looking units. If you ask me, pull Wriothesley if you're interested in a solid melt based DPS unit and can spare Bennett and Xiangling for him. As for Neuvillette, pick up the Nerd if you need a solid Hydro DPS in general, within the same vein as Ayato. No, I don't think Neuvillette will replace Child in International as some may think, but I believe that his own teams will still perform pretty well. Don't compare a DPS unit to an enabler. There is a difference. And Wriothesley will probably be the best melt unit we've got thus far, but we'll have to wait and see how he stacks up against Melt Ganyu. Well then, this has been Juice, signing out, and good luck to all regardless of who you choose. Me personally, I'm on Wriothesley's side.